We're going to ask the panelists to assemble. Sabine McNeill, Darren. Thank you. And maybe I'll kick off with a question, Max. When you and I originally talked about this conference, and you mentioned, one of the things I'd really like to talk about is this notion of analysis paralysis, and you were the one who brought the term, so I want to give you credit for bringing it to my attention in this context. Can you elaborate a little bit? I mean, clearly there's a lot of data out there, and there is this sense that people will sometimes feel paralyzed and not know what to do. And my very strong belief, and it has been confirmed today, is that creativity really is going to play a huge role there in helping both before you pull the data and after you pull the data find relevance and be able to avoid this analysis paralysis. So I can just ask you to elaborate on that.
Yes, the worst case scenario in my experience is when you have a CEO who's really keen on getting analysis and a team of analysts who's keen on doing analysis. So they kind of feed on each other, they kind of get all excited, and so you spend days doing all kinds of analysis, and in the end nobody makes a decision. So I really don't have an answer. It's an issue that I have seen of paralysis very often, and also of leadership not having sufficient understanding of the situation to make the right decision. So I think creative marketing comes in helping top management steer the company in the right direction with some marketing insights about the future, because often all of these analysis unfortunately result in no decisions or in the wrong ones.
May I add to that?
Sure.
Thank you.
I thought I really loved how and what you presented. I had the feeling that you know what I know, and the
scars.
Yes, you can compare scars exactly. How I like to kind of address or to solve this dilemma is by different user levels who create their own kind of vocabulary and their own visualization style, so that they kind of approach the data with the familiarity that they are used to. It's very clear that different people at different levels, especially in large organizations, have kind of a niche language. And these language barriers can be overcome by software by drilling down. It's like from an executive summary down to the chart level, there are different levels of interpretation, but they can become drop-down menus.
I can give you a live example, and I have to speak about this one vicariously because it's one that Tony did. And he sat down with the CEO of a retail bank, and the CEO was sat there with a 100-page MI pack that was produced every single month. And Tony had done some analytics on his banking data, which took quite a while to do actually. But when he sat down to talk to the CEO, he presented 3 bullet points. And in those 3 bullet points, the CEO read it obviously within a few seconds and said, "This 100-page MI pack doesn't tell me that. Intuitively, I know your stuff is correct, but I'm not being told that." And this is where marketeers can play a real role, because what Tony had done was to analyse the data from a customer perspective. So he looked at it to say, what is it your customers are doing? What is it strategically you need to do to help manage your business? And I think that's where, don't be, and once again, I'm vicariously saying this because this is my business partner's mantra, don't be afraid of simplicity.
So we do a lot of experimentation on eBay. It's actually a huge site for experimentation, and obviously some of those tests do work, and a lot of them actually don't. And the way we think about it is we use that model where we look at 2 axes. We look at the level of impact on our customer base. So is it going to impact a small group of customers, or is it going to impact the whole customer base? And then on the other axis, we look at how easy a change would be to roll back. So in case it goes horribly wrong, can we easily switch it off, or would it be impossible? And so we look at those two axes, and basically this is a good indication to tell us whether we're going to need more or less analysis to assess whether a change is going to be something that is going to be successful or not. So when you can imagine, when we do a change that is really high impact, really difficult to roll back, this is when actually our CEO will want to look at the results, look at the analysis. And so, at eBay we are heavily we love data. We love analysis. So we do a lot of that, but we also rely on what we know about our customers. And so to come back to your point, so a lot of it is based on the data, but also based on the customer insights and what we know about customers and what our customers tell us.
Actually, just to clarify, when we say don't be scared of simplicity, a lot of that is about how you communicate to the person. The fact that you've done something very sophisticated in the background is irrelevant to them, as long as they trust what you're saying. So that totally makes sense that you might be analysing lots of stuff, but the activities that you do need to be understood by everybody. So whilst we say simplicity is important, it's making sure everybody understands.
I've got a question over here. My name's Anna. I work at a digital marketing agency called Kuzai. And it's a bit of a broad question, but if each of you could choose your most valuable or your favourite way of visualising data, what would it be?
Mine would be in words. I'm a words person. Just explain to me what it tells me. Give me that story, actually.
I would like to spend the next day responding to the suggestion that was made to me, which is create a mock-up of what I presented theoretically, so that I put colorful layers of business data along my visual 3D axis. And I would like to make more mock-ups of people being able to use different frames in different colors along the kind of visualization. All I know is that the tool that I've got on my laptop Go, which produces the depth, that's what I want to see exploited, if you like, in as visual a way as if you like, graphically attractive way. But it seems to me that has to be layered, and like Darren and Tony and I spoke about that before. There are different levels at which we get things, ideas, insights, information. And there's one beautiful, Information is Beautiful is one of the websites I always love. There are just ways of getting concepts across, which is different, in which way do you get numeric data across. And numbers have the one and only USP, which is they are comparable. Words are not comparable, but images are comparable, and shapes are comparable through color and size. So there is not just one answer, actually. But thank you for your wonderful question.
So I think it really depends on who you are as a person. And personally, I'm a very visual person, and so very interested in design. And so for me, the way to engage would be more through a visual, so it would be a graph. But yes, it really depends on how, as a person, you would engage.
What does it take to convince your execs?
So it really depends again. Storytelling is really important. very simple story with visuals backed on facts, I think would be how they would be convinced.
I would just add that we're social animals, so we like to be in groups, and we often forget that ideally, so we do testimonials. It would be great to bring people to actually see the customers and talk to the customers and get data together with the customers, so they actually touch, they can actually see. If not, we can use today video technology, which is very cheap, so you can have 2 or 3 video testimonials, 2 snapshots of 1 minute each, which back up the data, and that way you really convey a good message, and people can watch it afterwards.
I always like to speak bullet language, but I think bullet videos would be even better.
Samuel Gao again. More than one speaker today talked about the lack of integration. For example, the 9/11 example, because all the data are there, but people still fail to constructively or systematically interpret it in order to come up with valuable suggestions. So do you think this is more of a simple communication issue, or do you think this is a deeper a reflection of the fundamental mindset of modern, when I say modern, this kind of post-industrial revolution Occidental way of thinking, i.e. the kind of very linear and categorized thinking? And do you think that is something that has been realized by the way that companies started to implement more of the kind of the Oriental holistic approach towards business or towards things in general? Thank you.
Tough question. I would just try. I will answer with the discussion I had with Edouard before, and I was saying to him, can we use big data to figure out how many French and Italian nationals, I'm Italian, live in London? Because the variance we hear between 200,000 and 300,000. That's about 50%, not bad as variance. So you can look at phone data, as we see in orange, traffic data, Eurostar, flights data, and to get to a precise number, where we would then range a few thousand errors, so it's 350, 400,000. The question I never said is that, well, maybe people don't want to know it, especially politicians, because then if you figure out that 2/3 are actually university graduates, then you have a huge brain drain sitting in London and not working back. So the answer to you is that the biggest barrier that I see is that you have to overcome people's, data is not the issue, data doesn't lie, but data is actually can be used to either bring or to avoid some kind of evidence. So the biggest barrier for me is people's mindset or goals that actually come in between. And that's why the question people ask, why don't politicians use data? Well, because there wouldn't be politicians otherwise.
I wanted you to go first because of the 9/11 connection, but I really think that the Western education system, which is book-based, which has its language starting at the top left corner, going down to the right, which has a different set for letters and for numbers, has determined the teaching where knowledge is passed on from generation to generation to generation, in this reproductive thinking, where creative thinking is not on the agenda. And thanks to globalization and technology, we can become more holistic, and Oriental thinking can influence Occidental thinking. So that's hope for humanity, in my view.
So there's kind of, to make the answer relevant to the political situation of marketing, I think what I would say is that data only ever tells you part of the story. It requires dialogue.
Could eBay answer on what it takes to modify a data model?
Maybe that's the question for Nick rather than for me. But just to build on your point, you're absolutely right. So we do use obviously the customer data from our database, but when we also listen to what our customers say through the boards, through Twitter, and that basically gives us a pulse of what's really going on with our community, either our buying community but also our selling community. So basically trying to join the dots in that fashion.
Is this working?
No.
It's okay, just do it.
We can just do it. Okay. Yes. No. Slightly iconoclastic question, perhaps. Some years ago, I taught on the marketing MBA program at London Business School with quite a famous marketing professor who wrote a book called Data Reduction. Some of you may remember Andrew Ehrenberg. He kind of challenged people. He said Unilever should give their data to Procter & Gamble because they don't understand it themselves. And he actually challenged the American Census Department to try to reduce that complexity of data. And he said very simple things, that analysts overcomplicate things. And if the answer is 7, with a few exceptions, don't present massive spreadsheets. Just say the answer is 7. So the question is there inbuilt within your world a temptation to make things overcomplicated to retain power?
So I think from my perspective there, given that I have worked in marketing for so long, I would actually blame the marketeers. And the reason for that is that if you don't work with analysts collaboratively and set clear business objectives, why should they analyse the data to give you the answer? Because you haven't asked a clear question. So I do think that analysts do get a hard rap in terms of big data and kind of just playing with it. I think, let's say commercial rather than marketing, you have to realise that you're equals and you need to work together.
We do have that challenge every day in the business, just because there is so much data at our disposal, and it's kind of, the easy answer is to, the easy way is actually to go and and present with a set of data, perhaps having forgotten that basically the 2 key numbers that the execs want to know about. And so this is my job is really to do that with Nick, to make sure that when we go and present, we have basically the key facts that really matter, because at the end of the day, that decision will probably be based on that. But we are facing that challenge on a daily basis. Yes. Yeah.
I love your question, because it kind of answers also what you asked before. I've heard Sir Mervyn King before the Treasury Select Committee moan about the fact that the economic data is ever so complex. And since, for me, no system is too complex anymore, I would just love, or can't wait for the moment when everybody who has access to the web can also go to the website that analyzes in real time past financial and monetary data, not economic interpretation, because as a mathematician I conceive economics to be a pseudoscience. But past data, past short-term, medium, long-term averages, and based on that forecast, so that everybody can figure out for themselves. And that's how to kind of devolve power from the person in the institution at this, that, or that level, down to anybody who is insanely curious and who is very well versed with the data, who is just on a learning curve.
Yes, I would just agree with the simple example. When I worked in consumer finance, it was clear that we shouldn't be lending to 18-year-old males. That was a clear choice. You don't lend to them because the chance of repaying is very small. And the question is, you have to give me data to pick that 5 or 10% that I can lend money to, and at a high margin, because we're going to be charging a higher APR to them because they're a higher risk customer. So to your question, yes, the answers are there. Big data to me helps in the granularity of the answers so that I can do very fine, precise decisions. But the big questions, yes, they're already answered. We never found incredible insights from data analysis that we were not aware of, even from an anecdotal perspective.
just prove what you know.
Yes, prove what you know and go to a level of detail which it actually, first of all, it proves the anecdotal evidence that we have from the salespeople. Show me the data, okay, and then help me understand why is this happening and where and for how long, and just go down, and you actually get to the bottom root. But the answers are there.
And if I may add, I think your question is really interesting because I think there's a fine trade-off between presenting just the data that matters and perhaps there's 2 or 3 facts, and then you need to make sure that you don't oversimplify to the extent that what you present may not be accurate. And I find that it's always difficult to have the right balance between simplification of presenting only the data that really matters, but in a way that is not going to distort, twist, or change basically the decision.
Actually, it's responding to Chris's one question regarding this kind of problem with data and how to interpret data and how to communicate the interpretations of data. It was actually something I came across. It was off the back of Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He talks about the System 1, System 2 thinking. I think I've spoken to Benjamin Voyer over there about it in the past as well. It's this idea that, and actually there was a guy at a conference in Berlin I was attending who was speaking about the internet and the models in the internet, and he contrasted Pinterest. I don't know if you're aware of Pinterest. It's like a photo sharing platform on the internet, to Lycos. And he talked about how there's these 2 different types of thinking that people apply, and the internet's a good example because it's gone from geekdom to massification, and I think the same thing's going to happen with data if it hasn't already. With Lycos, it was designed by the coders for the coders almost, and the language was the communication language wasn't appropriate for the masses. Whereas when you look at the more emotional products now, like emotionally engaging products like Facebook, like Pinterest, like Twitter, they tend to kind of communicate in a different language. They use more visuals, they use more sticky visuals and sounds. I think that this is perhaps one of the ways in which data can be used as a medium for the analysts and the marketers to actually come to another level in terms of limiting these misunderstandings. I mean, my personal opinion is that's the key, and I think that's only going to improve with these sort of conferences and these sort of questions. I just wanted to add that.
There was actually a question there before, sorry.
Doing a great job.
Hi, I work in digital marketing, so on a daily basis I use data to guide almost everything that I do. I think we sort of talked about the 9/11 report and things like that earlier on, and also politics and how data is used there. In my opinion, I'd like to know whether you agree or not. I think that because the general public aren't exposed to data, they don't use that on a daily basis to make decisions. You get huge differences of opinion between, like for example, climate change. The amount of people that believe the climate is changing compared to the percentage within the scientific community. People aren't looking at data on a daily basis, and they're not making decisions based on data. And ultimately, the people leading the country don't appear to be using data either to make their decisions. So do you think that can have that's the sort of reason behind why people aren't using data and aren't appreciating data when it is there?
I mean, from my perspective, one of the jobs that I've had is if you, I mean, how many people in the room check their bank statements every month? It's quite simple data, but most consumers don't look at it. So I think if there's no perceived value, which often bank statements don't have much perceived value, then consumers won't engage. And I think what we're seeing happening is a better understanding of how we can use the data that is now being generated in such large quantities. So I think in 10 years' time, the answer will be different. I would think at the moment, there's a lack of interest.
Or maybe a lack of time. I mean, it's fascinating. We are bombarded with data in everything we do, more and more. But we still have the same amount of time in a day. And so I wonder, whether people become almost like immune to that amount of data being thrown at them.
I suppose I'd like to hope for the next generations to become more savvy thanks to the internet, more curious, and not just sort of jump from video to video, but actually go into a bit of analysis, because it's about thinking slow as well, and looking at things a bit in more detail, and getting some insights, some deeper insights, and not just superficially packaged sales things. I mean, we don't just want to be consumers, do we? Or being entertained. It's just a little bit more to making sense out of one's life, I would have thought. And I guess that's why data is important. And certainly global data, planetary data, climate change is not just an issue, it is a job as far as I'm concerned. I love, therefore, this whole concept of data philanthropy. Let's hope that the kind of the right minds and the right tools find each other sooner rather than later. And then, as a whole, humanity really becomes better educated thanks to the net.
I think there are two big challenges. One is that you don't have ability to understand climate change unless you're a scientist and you have time to sit. So you have to find a reputable source. When I was a kid, people said, well, the TV said it, so the TV was a reputable source. Today, this is gone, so you struggle to find a reputable source of information. So you navigate from one side to the other, and usually you land on the government sites or the hospital sites if it's for health issues, because you think those are, they don't have. So I think that's the first issue that you have. You no longer have a source of information that you trust, and so you cannot make informed decisions on climate change unless you're an expert. And the second, the huge challenge I see is the conspiracy theory, which is coming out from having access to selected data. I have professionals coming to me and say, if you go to the internet, you figure out that 9/11 was a hoax. So how do you say that? Well, there's enough evidence on the internet. And unfortunately, this is also the case of data being used or misused or misinterpreted, so that you have smart people actually thinking that 9/11 is a conspiracy. And that's a big issue.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think like sort of back what we were saying, that if you set out with the idea that you've got an idea or theory that's right, and you set out to try and prove that theory, it's very easy. It's like the idea of saying, number 9 is important to me, and then you go out your day and you see the number 9 everywhere you go. But if you try to disprove that theory, that's when you start giving credibility to it, and I think that's what a lot of people don't do in their lives.
That was the question.
Yes. Maybe one quick one?
Very quick
yeah.
one.
I want to make sure we stop
yeah.
on time.
It's a very quick question, hops back maybe a couple of steps. Is it, in your experience, useful or counterproductive when giving the results of analytics to support recommendation to outline the uncertainty in the data? In other words, the counter indications that also have to be, does that help because it gives a sense of realism, or does it get in the way because the people that you're selling the analysis to, the recommendation to, want certainty in the recommendation?
Since I've got the mic, I just would like to answer quickly. One professor whom I showed my stuff, they said, oh, you're taking the noise out of the data. I think accuracy, precision, and certainty are always much more convincing.
Yes, on the other hand, there's no scientific method, because of everything we talk about, there's never another scientist doing. So even though we talk about the margin of error, there's nobody saying, I'm going to replicate the same experiment in Singapore and see if you're right, if orange data or G data. So yes, you're right, but to a certain extent, there's never any science behind it, unfortunately.
So, in my experience, yes, we want to know about the uncertainty. We want to know the level of uncertainty we are dealing with, because if we don't, then I guess we don't have all the facts. So when I make decisions, we never have a 100% certainty. That never happens. So, and I guess that's probably the art of the manager who has to decide based on the fact that we don't have all the information. All the information is not 100% bulletproof. But I guess that's the job, right?
I think it depends what you're doing. For me, you provide insight, and then it's about leadership. So if you're making decisions to do something, most CEOs make decisions intuitively. So when talking to a CEO, the percentage accuracy is generally not that relevant. And if you're using it to send out a campaign, then if there's a 10 or 20% error, does it matter? So I would say my experience is that accuracy is less interesting than the insight and the dialogue that's driven from that.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you to our panel here. I just wanted to say a couple of words to finish our conference today. We started this morning talking about, I sort of challenged everyone to think about the human social element of big data, and I think that's what we've done all day. We've looked at the complexities of creativity and the humans and social elements of looking at big data from the perspective of consumers, from the perspective of customers, as in the case of eBay. How do you get customers to change, and how do you get them to start accepting change? We've looked at it from the perspective of communicating big data, how to communicate it in a way that is going to be relevant and is going to be processed by the people who are going to use it. And then finally, in terms of decision making, so a lot of different facets there, which I thought were all very fascinating. Obviously, it will take more time to digest all this. We're going to make all of the information available. The videos will be available on the Creativity Marketing Center website, so feel free to watch them again and look at all the information, the huge amount of information that was shared today, and great ideas. I do want to thank the panelists who are here and all of our speakers today. In particular, I'd like to thank our keynote speaker, Edouard. Thank you very much for coming all the way from New York and starting us off this morning with a wonderful keynote presentation. I'd like to thank our audience, our guests, and our students, who were all a great audience today. Thank you very much. And again, this was the launch of our Creativity Marketing Center. Do make sure that you go back to our site. We'll be updating it very, very quickly and very frequently on a regular basis. So please do register to the site and keep in touch with us through the website. Thank you very much.